if I could compare it to anything, such a tightening in your stomach, just like the biggest muscle cramp you could ever possibly feel in your entire life, centralized in your abdomen, and also just like knives stabbing you at the same time. Yeah, I think that probably sums it up. Hey guys, it's Emily. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, or thank you for visiting if you happen to be here for the first time. In today's video, I am talking about my labor and delivery experience with my firstborn son. His name is Landon, and he is going to be 2 in about a month and a half. And I've been reminiscing a ton about his birth and just about his first couple of years of life. So I thought that it would be fun to make a labor and delivery story. I want to have those memories for myself. He very well may be our only child. So even though parts of my labor and delivery experience were a little bit traumatic, I want to have those memories for myself to look back on. So let's jump right into the video. My due date was June 28th of 2018, and on that Sunday, June 24th, 2018, I remember that morning I was just kind of relaxing downstairs, hanging out on the couch, and all of a sudden I kind of felt this, it wasn't a gush because that sounds like a lot of fluid, it was almost just like a trickle, I guess would be a good way to describe it. I was kind of going back and forth. I'm like, well, this could be my water, but if you've ever been pregnant, then you know that there's a lot of discharge that happens during pregnancy. And so I went to the bathroom and I wiped, and it smelled kind of like sweet, and it had a consistency to it. And I looked at a bunch of forums, and it said that there was kind of some conflicting views. Most said that amniotic fluid does not have any smell and it doesn't have any consistency to it. So I just convinced myself that it wasn't my water. I thought that it was just another part of pregnancy, more discharge, and that was that. And I didn't, the rest of the day, I had maybe 2 instances where I wiped and there was more of that stuff, but no more trickles, no more gushes, nothing like that. But later on that evening, I did start to have contractions, and they felt different this time. I did have like the tightening of my belly, just like normal Braxton Hicks, but a few of them were a little bit painful, and I had never felt that before with a Braxton Hicks contraction. It was always kind of like just an uncomfortable tightening feeling, but never any actual pain or cramping. And I did feel that this time. And I was already set to be induced that Tuesday. So Tuesday the 26th, I was already set to be induced. And I was hoping that my labor was actually starting that Sunday, because I was trying to avoid being induced. I was trying to do anything in my power to avoid being induced, because there's a lot of increased risks for induction, especially as a first-time mom, if your body isn't ready for it. That next morning, so Monday the 25th, I did notice that my belly looked a little bit smaller. I can try to, I think I have a picture, and I can insert it here. My belly just looked like tighter and a little bit smaller. And so I thought that maybe the baby had dropped a little bit more. I got up, did some cardio, and then went to my high-risk OB appointment. I was seeing a maternal fetal medicine doctor. I had been seeing him since I was maybe like 30 weeks, 29 or 30 weeks. I remember on my way to that appointment, I was feeling contractions, and they were hurting a little bit. So I was like, oh my gosh, Lord, please help this to be the start of real labor. So I got to that appointment. They did like, I had to like pee in a cup, and they took my blood pressure, they did the ultrasound, and then they would read the ultrasound, and then they would, the high-risk OB would call me into his office and we would go over it. So the first thing he said to me when I sat down, he said, your amniotic fluid level is really low. And I was like, okay. He's like, it's so low that he's like, I'm gonna send you over to the hospital right now, and we're gonna induce you today. And my heart sank because I was really, really wanting my body to go into labor naturally. And I was really, really wanting to avoid going to the hospital until I was in active or hard labor. And I kind of had to face the facts at that point in time that I wasn't going to get the entire experience the way I wanted it to. And that's usually the case for most women. Most women don't get the full experience that they want. So that's a side tangent. But I told him, I don't have my hospital bag with me, my husband's at work, so I'm gonna have to go home, I'm gonna have to call my husband, and then I'm gonna have to come back here to the hospital. And he said, okay, I'm gonna call the on-call doctor over there and tell him that you are going to be coming ASAP. So I was like, okay. So I remember leaving his office, calling my husband and saying, I'm being induced today, so you gotta come home right now. So we went home, I made myself a peanut butter and jelly and then packed up my last minute things, and then we skedaddled back over to the hospital, and we checked in at about 11 or 11:15. Here's a picture of me, the very last picture of myself with my sweet little baby boy inside me. And we got checked in, got into a room, got my IV in, went over my birth plan with my nurse. The on-call doctor, he was busy with patients up in the office at that time, so she was like, okay, just kind of hang out, and then we'll call the doctor in here, and he'll kind of go over his plan with you, whatnot. And they also checked me at that point, and I was 2 centimeters dilated, and I think like 80% effaced already. I think at around noon, the doctor came in to see me, and he kind of went over what his plan was for me. And he said that since I was already 2 centimeters, 80% effaced, and I was already contracting on my own, that they weren't gonna give me PITOCIN at that time, which inside I was like, oh, thank goodness, okay. So I called my mom at that point in time because I had told her and my sister that I was in labor, but I wanted to give her like an update. So I called my mom, and I just kind of mentioned about like the fluid the day before, and then I told her about how my amniotic fluid level was low at the high risk OB, and she said, what if that's your water? What if your water had broken yesterday? And I was like, well, I mean, I guess it would make sense. I guess if I felt a strange liquid come out of me the day before, and then my high risk OB said that my amniotic fluid levels were low, that seems to be a pretty strong correlation that my water had broke. So I decided to mention it to the nurse, and I hadn't mentioned it to her previously. And I just kind of mentioned it in passing. I'm like, I had this fluid leaking out of me yesterday. I'm like, I don't know if it was amniotic fluid or I thought it was just discharge. And she was like, okay, we're gonna swab you right now. So they swabbed me, and sure enough, my water had broken. So the doctor came back in, and he said, okay, since your water has been broken for more than 24 hours, we got to get this process going. We got to start you on PITOCIN. And then I was put on PITOCIN like 30 minutes after that. So my dreams were completely dashed of having my completely intervention-free natural labor. One annoying part about being put on PITOCIN was that I was just about to eat lunch, and then they said, oh, sorry, you can't eat anything because we're gonna put you on PITOCIN. That was really annoying because your girl likes to eat, pregnant people like to eat. I was so hungry. My husband was gonna get me Panera. And he literally was coming back from Panera, and they're like wheeling in the PITOCIN machine, and they're like, stop. No, you can't eat your sandwich and chips from Panera. We're getting you hooked up to PITOCIN. And I begged the doctor. I'm like, my blood sugar gets so low. Can I please have these like applesauce pouches that I brought? And he agreed to that. Looking back, I should have just eaten the damn sandwich. And then for those next few hours, it was really just, I just was starting to get contractions more regularly, and they started to get actually painful. I have a really high pain tolerance, so when I say something didn't hurt or hurt a little bit, it might be a little bit of a different experience for other people. But from the time that I got on PITOCIN up until, let's just say I got PITOCIN at like 1 o'clock. up until about 7 o'clock. It was really just cramping, and it was painful, but it really wasn't that bad. I had had terrible periods growing up, just awful cramps, like writhing in pain on the floor, breaking out in cold sweat, nearly throwing up from the pain. And this was my contractions, my labor contractions were more mild at this point in time than those period cramps. So I felt like I could handle them really well. I did my best to just distract myself. Thankfully there was a TV with cable in my room, so I just watched Say Yes to the Dress. Part of the movie Twister was on, which was like a family favorite of ours growing up. So I watched part of Twister, Say Yes to the Dress, probably other random TV shows. And I just either stood up with my legs like hip width apart and just swayed, or I was bouncing on the exercise ball. And that really helped to distract me, and it helped me like counteract the pain. And then when I would have a contraction, I would lean over the bed and let my belly sag and just try to relax into the contraction instead of like tensing up or anything. I really tried to just let my body do the work and support my body by relaxing as much as possible so my uterus could contract to its full potential. And then one thing that I want to note that really surprised me during this like early labor experience was that I was bleeding quite a bit, and that concerned me. And I mentioned it to the nurse, and she said, "Oh, that's completely normal. That just shows that it's actually a good thing, and it just shows that your cervix is ripening and thinning and starting to open." So it was kind of gross just standing over like this pad, and it was just dripping onto the pad, but I guess it's just a whole part of the glamorous experience that is birth. I noticed probably around like an hour or two after I started on the Pitocin, I already started to feel nauseous. So I asked for Zofran right away. I did not want to deal with nausea. I did not want to deal with throwing up during labor. I mean, that just adds a whole other dimension to your labor and delivery experience, and I was like, nope, I'm not dealing with this. So I got Zofran right away in my IV, and that helped so much. I truly thought that in this time I was still in early labor because it hurt, but it really didn't hurt as bad as I was expecting being on the Pitocin. So I really just kind of had the mindset of, yeah, this hurts, but it really doesn't hurt that bad, and you can distract yourself through the pain. And Emily, it's probably gonna get a whole heck of a lot more painful an hour from now, or 2 hours from now, or when you're in transition. So I've really helped, like that helped my mindset, not thinking, oh, ouch, 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 this hurts more than the previous one, so that means the next one is gonna hurt even more. I didn't let myself do that. I just said, focus on this contraction. It doesn't hurt that bad. They're gonna get worse. You just gotta deal with it. I was kind of like tough love on myself. I noticed that my contractions on Pitocin were very short, but they were intense. I've always heard, of course, every woman's body is different, but what I've heard is that contractions, you feel it starting, and then it builds, it peaks, and then it starts to drop off. Mine weren't really like that. Mine were really close together. In like early active labor, they were maybe every minute to a minute and a half apart, but they would only last like 30 seconds. So it would be just like a quick spike, and then it would go down, and then it would maybe like go up a little bit, and then it would go down, and then I would have like a little bit of a break, and then it would go sharply up and then down. At around 8 p.m., I suddenly felt the need to lie down. And in all of my Bradley classes, I learned that that is what signifies that you're starting to move into active or hard labor. So I really thought that all those previous hours that I had just done, that I was only in the early stages of labor, and now with me needing to lie down, I was now in active labor. So I really thought that I was only I was hoping for like 4 to 5 centimeters dilated at this point in time. But I think I did, since I was feeling the need to lie down, and I was feeling the need to start to do my meditation, do my full body relaxation, which if you don't know anything about Bradley, the Bradley method, They really focus on like meditation, full body relaxation to deal with the contractions. And so that was what I was doing when I started to lie down. So I had my husband read my birth affirmations, and I listened to my birthing playlist on my phone. And it was starting to get really painful enough that I could no longer distract myself with TV or with any other kind of activity. So I felt that need to lie down. I felt the need to really hone in, focus on breathing through the contractions, relaxing through the contractions. At around 8:30, the nurse came in and I said, okay, I feel like I'm at the point where I feel like my cervix has changed at least a little bit, and I want you to check me. So she checked me and I was at a 7. Since I was at a 7 of dilation, I knew that transition was coming. And transition is just those last few centimeters that your cervix dilates before you are ready to push. And transition is oftentimes the hardest part of labor. And it really tests you physically and emotionally. So since both my husband and I knew that transition was coming, he suggested that I go up and use the bathroom one more time, because once you hit transition, you're not going to want to go anywhere. So we got up to use the bathroom, and it was really hard to use the bathroom because of all the pressure down there. And once I sat on the toilet, I immediately felt the need to push, and I was having several contractions when I was in the bathroom, and that made me feel like I had to push. So finally I went pee, but it took a bit of me really concentrating. Okay, just pee so you can get back in bed. And I kept telling the nurse, like through the door, I'm like, I feel like I have to push, and she's like, don't push. And I'm like, I know, I'm trying not to, but it's really hard. I went through transition for the next probably 45 minutes. Praise Jesus. It only lasted 15 minutes or so. It was definitely less than an hour. I know that. It was really hard. It was really hard. The most emotionally, physically taxing thing that I've ever gone through. I think it was probably really traumatic for my husband to see me like that. I was making all kinds of noises. It was a mess. And thankfully though, like, even though I was really exhausted in my mind, I knew that the end was coming near, and time was coming for me to push, and that really helped me get through it. And what I had read in all my Bradley classes, that transition usually lasts only 30 minutes to an hour. So I was like, I can do this, I can get through this. At about 9:30, I could see them start to get the room ready. Like they were bringing in the equipment for the baby, like checking like his temperature, and getting out like the blankets and all that stuff. And the room was just getting a little bit more busy. So I knew that the time to push was coming. And the doctor came in at about 9:30 and he checked my cervix. So that was the third time that I had my cervix checked, and I was at 9.5. And he said, you have a little bit of an anterior lip, and that lip is just the little last part that we need before your cervix is fully dilated. And he's like, on your next contraction, I'm going to leave my hand in here and I'm going to try to pull that lip to the side, which hurt really bad. So at that next contraction, he did pull that lip, and then I was fully dilated and ready to push. What the contractions felt like during transition, I mean, it feels like nothing you've ever experienced before. The contractions were super short, maybe 20 to 30 seconds, if that. I mean, they were so short. They were super close together, but literally I couldn't even feel them coming. It was just all of a sudden full throttle, and then it would be full throttle for like a couple seconds, and then it would start to go away, and then barely a break, and then full throttle again, same thing, repeat, repeat, repeat. So I think that's why transition was so hard. And I think the PITOCIN probably did add on to that. It probably made it just a lot more intense. And I was at the 8 at that point in time, like the 8 units of PITOCIN. So it was wild. If I could compare it to anything, such a tightening in your stomach, just like the biggest muscle cramp you could ever possibly feel in your entire life, centralized in your abdomen, and also just like knives stabbing you at the same time. Yeah, I think that probably sums it up. Sounds about right. A little bit before 10 p.m. that night, I started doing the practice contractions with, it was just me, my husband, and the nurse in the room. And once I started pushing, I knew I was screwed. I was already so exhausted. I think really mostly in part because I really hadn't eaten anything. I had like 2 or 3 applesauce pouches. So in like 12 hours, I had only eaten maybe like 200 calories. And I'm very, very blood sugar sensitive. So if my blood sugar gets low, I get shaky, I get really disoriented, I get fuzzy in the head. And that's exactly how I felt. So all of those things added up together did not make for a good pushing experience. They started me out pushing in a squat position, and I really, really wish that I or my husband would have advocated for me after I ended up on my back to say, let's try a different position. But when you're in that experience, when you're in that situation, you're just not thinking totally clearly. I always thought I was going to be able to advocate for myself during my labor and delivery, but just something happened to me during the whole experience, and I was just so focused on the task at hand that I wasn't thinking about, oh, maybe I should try a different position, maybe I should do this, maybe I should do that. And I really wish that my husband would have advocated for me better. And if we ever do it again, I'm gonna like grill it into him that you need to speak up for me if I'm not speaking up for myself. But it's in the past. I'm not bitter about it. I'm not mad about it. I still love him. We're still married. But yeah, so I started off pushing in the squat position, and I don't know why they decided, I think the doctor at that point was there, and he's like, okay, well, let's try a different position. And then I ended up on my back, and being on your back is the absolute worst way to push. I don't know why I didn't speak up and say, what the heck am I doing on my back? I shouldn't be on my back. But there I was on my back pushing, and it went that way for another like hour and 45 minutes. Total time of me pushing was like 2 hours and 10 minutes. And it was the worst 2 hours and 10 minutes of my life. I think this is the part of labor that for me was the most traumatic. Some people love the pushing part. I did not. I felt like I was completely out of control with my body. I would feel like I was completely out of sync with my body. And the way I can describe it is that my contractions were still like those transition contractions, so they were hurting really, really bad. So as soon as the contraction would start, I would push because I was trying to counteract that pain. But I forgot all of my Bradley lessons that say when the contraction happens, let it build a little bit before pushing. That all went out the window. I did not remember to do that. I just pushed as soon as I felt that contraction because I wanted to counteract the pain. But then I gassed out so quick because I was so tired. And then when I was completely not having energy enough, when I didn't have energy left to push, my contraction was still going. So it still hurt really, really bad. So pretty much what would happen is like, even like the nurse and my husband said that they could see my son's head, but I would just be so tired that I really couldn't make any progress. So like any progress that I would make, like with those first 2 pushes, he would just kind of like slip back in. So all of that progress that I had made in those pushes, since I couldn't push long enough, it would never actually make any progress. So I was pushing, but I feel like he was never really coming out further, if that makes sense. This is the part where I kind of feel like a failure because I never really even like pushed him out 100% like myself. He never even crowned from me pushing him. And I know I'm not a failure, obviously, but like I do feel like I let myself down. And it got kind of scary because I mean, everything happened so fast, so I didn't even know like what time this part happened, but like his heart rate started to drop, and his heart rate got down in like the 80s, and regularly it's like between 130 and 160, like 160 during the contractions, then it would go down to like the 130s, 140s, and it got down to like the 80s, and like I'm still not sure if it was just like the fetal heart rate Doppler was just not working, or if he actually was in distress. I'm leaning towards that he was actually in distress because some meconium started to come out, and if you don't know what meconium is, it's like the baby's first poop. And so he had pooped in utero, and that's when they're like, okay, we really need to get him out. And then his heart rate started to drop. And so the doctor was like, if you can't push this baby out in the next contraction, I am going to give you an episiotomy. And I mean, I tried my best, but I couldn't do it. I felt like I had no energy to push, and I was so disoriented with my body, and I was kind of like silently panicking. Like there were all these people around, and like I kind of feel like I was like screaming for help, but like I wasn't actually saying anything. I kind of feel like my brain was kind of like paralyzed. I think that's a good way to say, like, think about it. Like my brain was like paralyzed. So since he was in distress and had done that meconium, they went ahead and gave me the episiotomy, and it was a pressure episiotomy. So as I was pushing, the doctor sliced me. He did give me like some numbing medication, and literally like as soon as he gave me the episiotomy, I swear my son just like flew out. It was literally like I didn't even really have to push. He just came out. They thought that they were gonna have to use the vacuum on me too. So they thought they were gonna have to give me the episiotomy, slice me, and if you don't know what an episiotomy is, it's where they cut you from your vagina all the way to your butthole. So it's great. You should try one sometime. But literally, I did not need the vacuum. Praise the Lord, I did not need the vacuum. They sliced me, he flew right out, and they didn't get to put him on my chest right away, which is another thing that made me really sad, because I had always like looked forward to that moment. They put him on the table right away, and I remember the first thing I said when he came out is I was like, is he okay? That's what I wanted to know, if he was okay, because I was really worried. Like when his heart rate was dropping, and I'm like, I know that I can't get this baby out like in the time that they're asking me to, and I was really worried that I was gonna have to go in for a C-section. I was terrified. But praise the Lord for his mercy. My baby was okay. He was totally fine, and he didn't have any meconium in his lungs. He was born at 12:03 a.m. on June 26, 2018, and that's my sister's birthday, so they share a birthday. He was only away from me for like 7 minutes, and then they placed him on my chest, and he was totally fine, praise God. He was 6 pounds, 8 ounces, and 19 inches long, so he's a total little guy.
I never meant to make you try so hard to push me out. I never meant to make you prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you love me, that you love me, you love her.
Okay guys, that is going to wrap up my labor and delivery experience. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you liked any part of it or found it helpful or interesting, would you please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on my future videos. I do a lot of cleaning videos. I plan on doing more mommy type videos, lifestyle videos, all that fun stuff. So be sure to hit that bell notification too if you subscribe so you're notified every time I post a video. And I hope to see you in the next video. Take care. Bye.